Hey guys, welcome to the Metaverse, and in this video, I think I'm just going to go over 3D utility. I've been seeing a lot of projects with basically the same utility attached to it, where they, give you the assets basically to be quote-unquote metaverse ready. And I think that's a really vague term that a lot of these projects use to kind of just get you interested in something that really doesn't have a definite definition yet. And so I thought I was, just going to go over what exactly that means, what you can do with these assets right now, what these projects are claiming you can do with them in the future, and where I see the future of this utility going, because I'm seeing a lot more of these projects being developed where one of the main utilities is some kind of vault or some kind of server that they're going to give you the actual 3D models and, skeleton textures, all the files associated with the 3D NFT are going to be delivered to you, so you can do animations with them, put them in games, etc. And there's never really been a good explanation from these projects as to what they really intend you to do with them. So I'm just going to go over your options right now. But really quickly, before I get started, be sure to like and comment and subscribe if you like this content. And without further ado, let's get into it. So the most popular one by far, by a insane margin, is obviously CloneX. And one of their main utilities, in fact, the second thing they flaunt on their roadmap here, is the 2022 3D Vault, which says, quote, live 3D file updates for your clone to use on the metaverse and across different platforms. Now, on the metaverse and across different platforms, if you don't really know how games work or 3D modeling works, can sound like a lot because the metaverse is talked about so much. But right now, that actually means shockingly little. What that essentially means at this exact moment is that you can use these files in Blender modeling programs to make animations for yourself. You can upload them to VRChat, which CloneX has advertised. Their models used in VRChat. You could upload them to Chill Out VR, High Fidelity. There's a sort of wide range of games in the VR space that allow you to upload your own content, but aside from that, we really don't have much in the way of that. And in order to kind of combat that, you'll see this project also says they're developing their own sort of metaverse, which from what I can see is more like NFT rooms that you can hang out in your CloneX avatar here. So the file formats that they provide are .blend, which is Blender's native file format that will include everything that's in the Blender file: lighting information, camera information, the model itself, obviously an armature if it's rigged, textures if it's UV mapped, etc. Everything you need as a 3D modeler to actually do something with this model would be included in that file. A .obj, which is just 3D model data, no armature, which means no animation. .fbx, which is the same as an obj, but with an armature and bone weights, so you can actually pose it, animate it, you can move the limbs around. That's what the difference is between having an armature and not having an armature. And you'll see a kind of distinction here within projects as to what kinds of file types are supported and what that actually means for you in terms of what you'll be able to do. .ma, which I have not heard of, .glb, which I have heard of, Unreal Engine, which is not a file format, and DAZ 3D, which is a file format. Unreal Engine, as a game engine, can ingest all sorts of different models from all sorts of different programs in any number of different formats, and DAZ 3D is a CloneX partner and also the subject of the next topic here, non-fungible people, which I've covered fairly extensively, is the project by DAZ 3D that essentially has the same utility, and you can see exactly the same utility that they're flaunting here. Each NFP comes with a fully rigged 3D model ready to use however you like. Now, at least in this case, they're not just kind of blanketing it at all, saying use it in the metaverse, because there is no metaverse yet. Like, that doesn't really mean anything yet. In the future, that'll mean a lot. And I'll get into that in a second here as to why that is actually pretty important. But here it says use however you like. 3 of these 6 points are essentially the same thing. They're going to give you the assets. They're going to give you all sorts of different file formats. They're advertising its use in Unity and Unreal and any other game engine. Godot should be able to ingest this stuff. But essentially, it's the same utility. And the common thread between these two projects with the same utility is that they're enormous. They are two of the most popular, most hyped projects that are out right now in the main space. And this utility here, here it is by name, Blender, same, Unreal, same, Unity, same, and Daz Studio, obviously, since they're making it. They're really pushing this thing. And this is also a project that has advertised use in VRChat and other, social VR platforms, which is here. Actually, no, they did. It says metaverse ready right there. So they are using the phrase metaverse, even though that's still in the future. But essentially what you can do with that now is exactly the same thing you can do with CloneX, which is animations, VR chat, stuff you would do with the 3D model data itself right now is still fairly limited. And it's the same deal here. Although these guys, the Non-Fungible People team, as far as I know, have not ever said that they would be developing a game. There's a couple reasons why developing a game with these assets would be impossible, but the number one thing to take away from that is that this is exclusively for animators, and it's exclusively for what I assume they are not saying by name, but what they've hinted at are VTubers, people who use 3D avatars for their own avatar for doing things like streaming or Zoom calls or YouTube videos are considered VTubers. And there's been, footage of these being used in their promotional. So that's another really big project with essentially the same utility, and there's a pattern here. One of the older projects that has always had this as a utility, but in a sort of different way, are Meebits. And Meebits are obviously, they don't really need an introduction. They're very big. And here it says, same blurb. Owners of a Meebit are given access to an additional asset pack that include the full 3D model. Use it to render and animate your Meebit or use as an avatar, again, in the metaverse. Here, though, is a bit of sort of beginner 3D modeling knowledge that they seem to have missed. It says T-pose included. All Meebit owners can access a T-pose OBJ file that be imported into any most standard 3D modeling and animation software. Now, the thing about that, I'm just going to skip over the bad grammar, is an OBJ has no armature, so you can't animate with that. In fact, the image on the left here that is animated is using a free rigging software called Mixamo that does all the actual bone work for you. So the asset that you get with this one doesn't come ready for animation whatsoever, which I found a little interesting. I think this is probably a result of the general consumer of these things not knowing anything about modeling, not knowing anything about gaming, and just kind of, giving into blurb here. The other two projects have far, far more utility, in my opinion, and that kind of brings me on to what I think about this utility in general, because you're going to see it a lot more. In fact, I said in my last video, I think that the NFP guys understand that this is going to be a primary utility from here into the, near future, and they're undercutting the market with their exceedingly cheap price for what they're giving you. I think that you're going to see a lot more projects, especially Q1 of 2022, that are going to have the same utility, because it's actually not an extremely difficult utility to include if you're already doing a 3D collection. What that tells me is if you see this utility around early on, say Q1, maybe a little bit into Q2, I would study those projects carefully, because the earlier that these projects are adopting this singular utility, the more likely getting into them is actually going to have an impact on your investment. The earlier you can get into something like this, that's obviously going to appreciate, the better. Down the line, it's going to be. Anyone who got onto the whitelist for NFP is obviously sitting pretty. Same deal with any of these projects you're going to see January, onward, a little bit into the next year. You're going to definitely want to look at them a little closer than you probably otherwise would with this utility, because what that also tells me is that there's something happening in the back end where they're going to be making some kind of, not a unified metaverse necessarily, but there has to be some kind of planned external game or application where you can use a lot of these different things, because there's a large emphasis on being able to create your own content with the actual models themselves. So when that rolls around, I would suspect that the existing projects that have this utility are going to skyrocket, because it's going to boost their popularity. Just like having your models with a voxel edition, a voxel collection boosted their sales because of all of the deals that happened with the sandbox. I think this is going to be the same thing, but on a wider, open source, more consumer friendly scale, which is obviously the opposite of what the sandbox is right now. I think to take away from this would be, you should look at these projects while they're still, in early adoption of this utility. Like I said, Q1 is where you're going to want to focus most of your attention on projects with this utility. I think after that, you might end up in a bubble where people might see it too much and kind of get used to it and kind of get sick of it, and it'll kind of depreciate in value. Now, obviously, I'm not going to just tell you to jump directly on these projects and don't even think about it and just invest, because, that's not wise. But I will say, compared to the research that you do now on projects, I would do a little bit more research into these projects, because I really think that when this hits its stride, if you can find a good project that has this utility, I think it's going to be an all new high. That's pretty much all I've got for this video. If you liked it, be sure to like it and leave a comment down below. I read all of those. If you want to be kept up to date on when I upload and my upload schedule, then subscribe and ring the notification bell. That'll give you a notification every single time I have a new upload. And until next time, stay meta.